General Bill Barr testified December 14th should have been the end of the matter.
December 14th was the day that the states certified their votes and sent them to Congress. And in my view, that was the end of the matter. I didn't see, I thought that this would lead inexorably to a new administration.
Mr. Cipollone also testified that the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, said he shared this view.
Yeah. As early as that November 23rd meeting, we understand that there was discussion about the president possibly conceding the election. And specifically, we understand that Mark Meadows assured both you and Attorney General Barr that the president would eventually agree to a graceful exit. Do you remember Mr. Meadows making any such representation?
Are you saying as part of that meeting or separately? Again, without getting into that meeting, I would say that that is a statement and a sentiment that I heard from Mark Meadows.
I see. And again, do you know if it was on November 23rd or some point?
Again, it was probably, around that time, and it was probably subsequent to that time. It wasn't a one-time statement.
Mr. Meadows has refused to testify, and the committee is in litigation with him. But many other White House officials shared the view that once the litigation ended and the Electoral College met, the election was over. And here's President Trump's former press secretary.
I wanted to clarify, Ms. McEnany, so back to my previous question, it was your view then, or was it your view that the efforts to overturn the election should have stopped once the litigation was complete?
In my view, upon the conclusion of litigation was when I began to plan for life after the administration.
And this is what Ivanka Trump told us.
December 14th was the day on which the Electoral College met, when these electors around the country met and cast the electoral votes consistent with the popular vote in each state. And it was obviously a public proceeding or a series of proceedings that President Biden had obtained the requisite number of electors. Was that an important day for you? Did that affect sort of your planning or your realization as to whether or not there was going to be an end of this administration?
I think so. I think it was my sentiment probably prior as well.
Judd Deere was a White House deputy press secretary. This was his testimony about what he told President Trump.
I told him that my personal viewpoint was that the Electoral College had met, which is the system that our country is set under to elect a president and vice president. And I believed at that point that the means for him to pursue litigation was probably closed.
And you recall what his response, if any, was?
He disagreed.
We've also seen this testimony from Attorney General Barr reflecting a view of the White House staff in late November 2020.
And then at that point I left. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office, and caught up with me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Likewise, in this testimony, Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to Mark Meadows, described her conversations with President Trump's Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, a former Republican congressman.
He had expressed to me that he was concerned that it could spiral out of control and potentially be dangerous, either for our democracy or the way that things were going for the 6th.
Of course, underlying all of this is the fundamental principle that the President of the United States cannot simply disregard the rulings of state and federal courts, which are empowered to address specific election-related claims. The President cannot simply pretend that the courts had not ruled.
By that time, the president or his associates had lost 60 out of 61 cases that they had brought to challenge different aspects of the election in a number of states. They lost 60 out of 61 of those cases. So by the time we get to January 3rd, that's been clear. I assume, Pat, that you would agree the president is obligated to abide by the rulings of the courts.
Of course.
And I assume you also would...
Everybody is obligated to abide by rules, of course.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct.
Yet President Trump disregarded these court rulings and the counsel from his closest advisors and continued his efforts to cling to power. In our prior hearings, you have heard considerable testimony about President Trump's attempts to corruptly pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count electoral votes, to corrupt the Department of Justice, to pressure state officials and state legislatures, and to create and submit a series of fake electoral slates. Now, we will show you what other actions President Trump was taking between December 14th, 2020 and January 6th.